everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 403. Today we're going to talk about Ash's Rise of the Phoenixborn. This is a game from Plaid Hat Games. Just coming out right now. I'm actually packing for Gen Con as I record this. And just got done playing 2 games of it and using, well, 4 of the decks between the 2 of us. So we haven't played with 2 of the decks, but we played with 4 out of the 6 decks that you can make. And what this game is, speaking of decks, is sort of an LCG style, trading card game style, battle head-to-head game where each player takes on one of the Phoenixborn, who is sort of like in a Highlander fashion, trying to eliminate all the other Phoenixborns in the land, and then using their units and special spells and everything to take them down in battle. Now, if you're familiar with Magic the Gathering or any other trading card game, this is going to be right at home for you, but it's also very, very different. It has dice-driven sort of energy or mana that you're going to use and spend, and a very different kind of turn structure. Kind of reminds me of the Star Wars LCG loosely. But let's jump into how it works, and then I'll tell you what I think of it. Okay, here you can see everything that you get in the box of Ashes. Here you've got your 6 Phoenixborn and their decks underneath them. You've got a bunch of dice here, a bunch of tokens. You've got a rule book here, which is very well written and illustrated and all kinds of good stuff. Now, I'm not going to go step-by-step detail in it or anything like that because, well, Rodney at Watch It Played has done several videos already. So let's take a look here at Ardell. Let's say I've chosen her. I think she's my favorite now out of the couple of games we've played. You can see a couple of things about this Phoenixborn. You can see her hit points. You can see the number of units or creatures that she can have on the battlefield and the number of spells she can have on the spell board. In this game, you'll put spells on the board, activate them turn after turn, and then you also might play a spell and discard it. She's also got a special ability there. And then we've also now got a big deck of spells. In addition to the spells, Ardell especially has a lot of these. She's got these conjurations here. You can see there's a blue jaguar. Here we have a mist spirit. And you have different spells in your deck that are going to bring these out. And these are going to be going into your battlefield. And again, eating up the limit here of how many creatures you can have in your battlefield. Now, the first thing you're going to do every game is you're going to draw 5 cards out of your deck, but you actually get to go through and choose them. And the decks that I have here are all the pre-made decks, and they tell you in the rules which 5 you should choose for your first game. So of course you're going to have some summon creatures, summon Mist Spirit, summon Blue Jaguar. You might get Out of the Mist, which is a really powerful spell. So regardless, you're going to have 5 spells, and they all have to be different names. You can have up to 3 copies of the different spells in your deck, but you can have one different for your starting hand. Now, the other thing to note is you're going to have some of these magic cards here. So you can see illusion magic, natural magic, there's ceremonial magic, and there's also charm magic. And these are the different colored dice that you can use. So let's grab a couple of these. And depending on which Phoenixborn you choose and what types of spells and what their costs are going to be, you're going to allocate your dice pool. You're always going to have 10 dice, but they can be anything that you want. So in your game, let's just grab some more dice. There's 6 there. So now we've got 4. This is not what they would look like. You probably wouldn't have this lone pink one sitting out here. And you may not even have 3 colors. All of the players that we've used now have just had 2. But maybe you'd have a deck that had, these 2 one-off blues or something. Who knows? So on your turn, you're actually going to roll all of these, and then they're going to be here in the active pool. And you can see there's cards for each of these. So this is a charm magic, and this gives you a special ability that it can be. And then you've also got here natural magic, and these are the blue dice here. And if you notice here, this base cost here, this base mana is the same shape on all of these. So we've got this one here and this one here. So all of the dice can contribute that sort of level 1 or tier 1 mana. Now what you're going to do, let's go ahead and get rid of these dumb blue dice here for a second, and then we'll grab 2 more of these. And then so now we might have these 2 cards, and you can see this says here active dice pool, and this says exhausted dice pool. So you're going to roll these, and as you take actions, you might spend a couple of these and move these over. And then at the beginning of your next turn, you're going to re-roll whatever's exhausted and move that back over here. So the mana is very different in this type of game. So once you've got your spell deck, you've got your starting hand of 5 cards, you've rolled your dice there. Whoever rolls the most basic symbols, so these symbols here, is going to actually get the first player token, or the initiative token here. You're going to get this token, and you're going to take your turn first, and then you're going to go back and forth with your opponent, and then this will pass over to your opponent at the end of the round. Now, the breakdown of the turn is very simple. Of course, you roll your dice, and then you're going to discard cards from your hand. So you can take and discard any number of cards that you want, and then you're going to draw back up to 5. Now, only during this prepare phase here, if you have to draw cards after discarding and you don't have any cards left in your deck's only 30 cards, you're going to take a point of damage for each card that you can't draw. If you have to draw, later on in your turn, there's no damage, but only in this prepare phase, if you have to draw back up to 5, do you take damage. And of course, you lose the game once you take damage equal to your total hit points. So after you've rolled your dice, discard any cards you don't like, and then draw cards, you go into player turns. Now, you have one main action and one sort of optional side action that you can do. This is a very, very interesting thing. So what can you do for a main action? Well, let's take a look at the cost on the cards. So anything that has a cost like this with this sort of wheel looking thing, that's going to be your main action. Now, you can see Ardell's special ability. She has this sort of, I don't know what that is, like a little star. That means it's a side action. So she could do one main action, she could play Steady Gaze, and then she could do her side action there. So you always have one of each. You don't always have to do a side action, but you always have to do a main action. And one of the main actions actually is to pass. So if she were to want to play this, you can see here, this costs 2 of this kind of mana. Now if we take a look here at this card, we can see here's the base mana, and then we have sort of level 2 mana with this sort of face, and that was the cost on this card. If we take a look at that. Okay, so these level 2 manas can always act as if it was a level 1 mana, and then the level 3, which is the rarest side of the dice, is going to be, be able to act as any of those. And the same with this card here. So this little wolf's head kind of thing can be any of those. So if I wanted to play this card here, I would move 2 of these over here, and this ability says to place 2 exhaustion tokens on a unit. Now let's say our friend across the table had this Rhino out, then we would have placed 2 exhaustion tokens. And a lot of times you will have an exhaustion token as a cost. You can see that little symbol there. This actually matches that symbol on the card. So if she did this, I would have to place an exhaustion token as well as spending the leaf here, and this is actually a blue mana thing that she would normally use there. But so you would have to spend that die and then mark that, so you can't do that again, and then at the end of the turn you're going to go ahead and remove all of the exhaustion tokens on different things. Now here's an example of something you might do. Let's say, how do I get creatures out? Well, here we've got a summon blue jaguar and then a summon mist spirit. Well, you can see here the cost to actually get this card out is just to use up your main action for the turn. So if I play that, that's my main action. That's all I can do. Maybe I can do a side action. And then on the next turn, once the card's out on the spell board, you can see this tells you where to actually play the card. If you were to discard the card, it would say discard. So I put this out, and on the next turn, I'll use my main action for that turn, exhaust it, again with one of the exhaustion markers, and then pay 2 of this basic mana. And it says place a blue jaguar conjuration into play here. So this would eat up one of the spots on my spell board. Maybe on a future turn I place this out. This lets me summon the mist spirit. I can actually play this, and this has a cool little sort of kicker effect where if you play one of these and then a main mana, then you can put out more than one of these mist spirits here at the same time, so you can get these out. And so you go back and forth by, you do a main action, possibly a side action, you're spending your dice, and then once both players pass, then we're going to go into the reset phase here, and then you're going to recover and then remove exhaustion and then exhaust the dice. So you can actually leave, if you had a really nice die that you just couldn't really spend, this is one of the higher level die, you can leave that, you don't have to spend it, and you can take and re-roll all of these. But if you had some of these lower ones here, these are the base mana, so you can say, okay, well, I'll leave that one and then I'll re-roll this one here, and that's pretty cool. So you re-roll all these back over here, and then anything that has an exhaustion on it, you're going to then pull off. And then some of the creatures out here have a recover. For example, this fella here, if he took a damage and he hadn't had enough damage to kill him, he could recover one of those damages on him. And then you keep playing until one of the Phoenixborn is killed. Now, the main part of the game, of course, is attacking other creatures and things. So let's take a look at an example. So let's take a good look here at the Ironworker and the Rhino, and these are for for Cole here, and these are some creatures that'll come out of him. And so we've got here Aradel and her creatures, say a blue jaguar and a mist spirit there. And so let's say Cole here was going to try to attack. Now he can target a couple of things. He can name one or more attackers, and then he can target either the Phoenixborn or a unit. Now, if they both were attacking the Phoenixborn, then let's say there was no blockers, then of course all of their attack would go through, and that would be a total of 7 life, and that is way more than half of her life. So we want to do blockers. So we can assign 1 blocker to each attacking unit, and attacking is your main action. So you can do an attack and then possibly a side action as well. And there's some cool little combos and things you can do with certain things that way. Now you can only declare attackers and blockers for that matter if a creature is not exhausted. If it's exhausted, of course, then you can't do it. And once you're done with the attack, then you put the exhaust marker on there. Now let's say I just wanted to block with these 2 Mistborn spirits. I have 2 options as the blocker. I can counter attack, or I can just sort of absorb the attack. Now in this case, these creatures are going to die because you can take a look here. This has a life of 1, these both have a life of 1, and these have an attack of 2 and 2, and this one has an attack and life of 5 and 4. So if I just wanted to like absorb it, I don't necessarily have to exhaust my blocker, but in this case, if I want to sort of apply the damage back, then I would exhaust it. So in this example, I'd go ahead and exhaust both of these, and then of course these would be exhausted from the attack, and then these would die because they're so weak, and then these would each do 1 damage back to these attackers here. Now, if it was sort of the reverse, where these Mistborns were attacking, and I would say, well, let him absorb that. He's going to take the damage, but he's not going to exhaust. He's not going to apply the damage back to him. So he's still going to live, but then now he's freed up on my turn to go ahead and attack back. And again, these can't block because they're already exhausted. Now it works in a similar way with the attacking unit, because you can declare attackers. So let's take these off again, and I can say these both guys are going to attack this unit. You don't have to necessarily target the Phoenixborn directly. You can attack maybe a large unit or something. So they can both attack this unit, and in that case the Phoenixborn could then block, and the Phoenixborn can actually block if they're exhausted, but a unit itself can only block if it has this ability, unit guard. The unit may guard a unit that is being attacked, so they can actually go in and then block 1 of these attackers that way, and it works in a similar way. Of course, you're going to apply damage to the Phoenixborn directly, but then you choose to counterattack or apply damage back, then you're going to have to exhaust this creature there. So the attacking is very, very cool, where you're not just saying I attack and then who you're blocking with. You're like, okay, I'm attacking this person with these people, and that's going to be my action. I may attack with these 2 other guys here on my next turn, and then they may attack this or attack the Phoenixborn directly. Now the last thing to talk about, and probably one of the more important things, is meditation. So let's get rid of these creatures just for now. And let's say we roll the dice and we don't really like what we rolled. We rolled a whole bunch of these basic symbols, and they're not going to do us a whole lot of good. And we want to change those. So for one of our side actions, we can quote unquote meditate. And from there, you can discard cards from your hand, any cards that you have on your spell board, cards off the top of your deck, and then you can change for each card that you discard the die to any face that you want. So you can set yourself up then later for cooler side actions, or cast that big Rhino that you really needed to get out, even though he only costs basic mana anyway. But you get my point. You can set up for some cool stuff, and it's a whole management thing. Again, once you kind of burn through the deck, you kind of get close to threading the needle of possibly taking damage at the start of your turn. But this helps to greatly mitigate the luck of the die roll and how the mana or the energy rolls out for you. Oh, the last thing I want to talk about was focus. This is a really cool thing. Now, if you remember, this is something you definitely have to keep in mind when you play. You've got a battlefield number. This is 8 in this case. That's the number of creatures you can have. And then you have a spell board number, and that's the number of spells you can have on your spell board. So, for example, this is from a different mage here, but this is Summon Iron Rhino, and this is a spell board. So this takes up a slot. But if you notice here, let's take a look at this card in detail. Costs you a main action. Of course, you have to exhaust it when you do this action, and then it costs you 6 basic mana, and it says place an Iron Rhino Conjuration into your battlefield. And if we look here, the Iron Rhinos are pretty beefy, right? They've got a attack of 5, a life of 4, and they look really cool. Okay, that's a lot of mana. I mean, that's 6 dice out of your 10, more than half. But this says focus 1, reduce the activation cost of the spell by 1. Focus 2, reduce it by an additional. So you can get that cost down to 4. Now what focus is if you summon this here, and I put that out, and then on a later turn, I put a copy of that same spell, then that means I focused it. In this case, it's a focus 1, because I've got 1 extra copy. And if I did a third one, I've got a focus 2 now. And so the other cool thing about this is these don't eat up slots on your spell board. So if you've got a spell board limit of 3 or 4, you can have multiples here. And the other cool thing is you can actually activate these multiple times. And in this case, the cool effect of the focus is you get a cheaper discount on something in Rhino. Sometimes it'll enhance like the buff or the amount of damage that the spell does, but this is a really cool mechanic as well. Okay, so that is Ashes. Now what do I think of it? Well, like I said at the beginning, I only played the 2 games of it, and I'm getting ready to go to Gen Con here, and I was like, you know, you get the burn inside, you need to like make the review and get it done, and you want to tell everybody how cool the game is, because the game is really, 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 really fun. Really great. Now, I'm on a little bit of a high from it. I have to sort of caveat that. So if I come off a little bit, you know, over the top, I do apologize, but let's just kind of walk through all the cool stuff in the game. Now, first of all, you have the dice rolling, which is great, because a lot of times these, you know, sort of trading card style games, you'll have turns where like you get to do 0, squat, nothing. This, you get to do stuff. You may not get to do the greatest thing in the world, but you're going to get to do something pretty cool. Now you have the whole mitigation thing, the meditation, discarding cards off the top of your deck, maybe blowing away a spellboard card that wasn't really doing it for you. It was a good one to put out early, but you've got some better ones you want to play anyway, so you blow away one of those spellboard cards, turn it to that little frog picture, which lets you do damage or whatever the thing may be, and then you get that 1 extra damage to hit your opponent after you've, you know, attacked them for 3 damage already. So you know, just, you know, little cool combos like that are really possible with the dice and the mitigating and the meditation and all that stuff. The other awesome thing is the spell board, because you start off first of all with 5 cards in your hand that you get to choose. And so the starting cards that they give you to choose in the rules are like, here's some summon creatures, because you're going to get some creatures out, and here's some other cool spells. So you get those out and you play them, and then boom, I have the ability to bring out a creature every single turn if I really want to. Now, of course, those cost you a main action. So once you exhaust that, whatever creatures that brings out, that's not happening again unless you somehow remove the exhaustion token until we reset and go to the second round. And you also have the limit of the battlefield that you can only have a certain number of creatures there. But that's really cool. It gets you set up, it gets you going, you're in there blasting and hitting each other in the face, and you have to deal with that sort of you know, right from the beginning. And so that kind of leads me into the next thing that I really like is the initiative token, because that is awesome. That is fantastic. I love the initiative token, because if you're the player that doesn't currently have initiative, you can kind of play it where, let me just clear his board. Don't worry about doing any damage to this Phoenixborn directly. Do some stuff to clear it, maybe get an exhaustion, because the initiative token, I know it's coming to me at the start of the next turn. Everything is going to be recovered and refreshed, no longer exhausted, and then I'm going to lay down the hammer on you with my big Rhino or whatever it could be. Had a really cool game the last game we played. With the, excuse me, her name is really hard to pronounce. Her name is Aradel Summerguard, and she was wrecking the Rhino guy. I was playing the Rhino, and he had the Rhinos out, but he kept getting exhausted, and then she kept doing these big damages where she'd get a bunch of mists out and then do a card that says, do all the damage equal to the number of creatures that I have in play to a particular unit on your side, and she'd wreck it. She would exhaust the other one that came out, and so, and then he was down to like 3 life left, and then just enough to come out and then just railed on her and just killed her like in 2 turns, because just got the upper hand, and the decks were very soon to be exhausted. And so that was a concern as well, because it's like, okay, I've got to kill her now, because you know, I'm gonna have to draw cards, and then that last points of damage are going to go right to my head and I'm done. But I really like her abilities and stuff. Really cool, sort of control lots of creatures, you know, doing combos and stuff like that. That's really neat. And you can see a lot of room to like sort of start swapping and combining the decks. The other decks we played with was Noah Red Moon, and he was really cool. He had this kind of recursion thing where he would get, I don't remember the name of the unit, I'll look at it here while I'm talking, but it would come out and would do damage as it came out. Stormwind Sniper. It sort of looks like a Night's Watch or a Wilding if you're a Game of Thrones person. But he comes out and does damage, but then you have other cards that can go and dig him and bring him back out. And then you've got cards where if one of your units dies, you can play that card and it does damage back to them. Or if your Phoenixborn takes damage, you can do a whole mess of damage back to the unit. So you like kind of want to get hit. Like I said, I'm trying not to oversell it because I only played it 2 times, but the fact that you kind of get stuff to do every turn, no matter what, you have the dice to manipulate, you have combos you can set up. And here's the other thing is when you rotate the dice and you do the meditation to change the dice face to something, your opponent's going to go, what the heck are you doing? What is your plan? Because, okay, I know the special abilities even that you have on these cards here, you know, these are each die that you have in there, you have a different special ability that you can add on to your mage just by the type of mana that you choose. And it's like, oh, you made that a frog, or you made that a knife, and you jacked me with that knife thing where you did damage back to me after I did damage to you, and you just turned it into a knife. Okay, so I think you're going to do that. So there's, I wouldn't call it bluffing, but there's sort of, you know, there's some reading and things like that, because a lot of times a lot of these cool little combos and extra abilities come from those side actions, but it costs you your side action to convert the dice. So you can't go like convert the dice, do the thing. You've got to convert the dice and then do the thing. So you kind of do that early in the turn, and then you got to sort of strategize over those multiple, you know, 4, 5, or 6 actions that you're going to do and within that turn. That's a very interesting space to be in because, you know, you're kind of telegraphing a little bit, but then you've got sort of a medium turn game where it's very tactical. It's like, I'm going to do this now, convert the dice. Then when I need to, you know, just add on an extra little piece of joy for my opponent, I can do that. There's some other neat things. You know, a lot of this, the devil's in the cards, the devil's in the details, and there's cool equipment things. There's like illusions in this in Noah's deck that are very neat, and so you can kind of beef them up. But if they take damage, they kind of just, they're paper thin because they're illusions. So thematically, a lot of the special abilities and things are very, very neat. You know, they've got this mechanic here of these activation tokens that you just use to kind of track generic things. So somebody might come in and they acquire tokens as they go along, and the tokens will mean different things for you know, different characters and stuff like that. The art's really cool. It's really fun. It's I wanted to call it like Magic the Gathering 3.0 because we've kind of like had, you know, new iterations. We had like, you know, and so many different card games versus Netrunner, you know, some of the new LCGs from Fantasy Flight, the new Star Wars LCG, and you had like this old Star Wars game. So you've had like a lot of iterations on this head-to-head 2-player battle type of thing. And this is really the dice mana thing is, I mean, it just kicks it up to the next level, and all of the mitigation and stuff that you can do. If you don't like this style of game, like you don't like Magic, you know, you don't like those kinds of games, I would still try this because I think this has enough interesting stuff to do. Is even if you're getting your face caved in, like you're still gonna have an interesting time with your own deck, you know? And you've really got to be cognizant. I mean, those of you out there that play Magic and then play it a lot, you know, and you've played competitively and you know about the tactics and knowing the meta and reading your opponent. This has so much of that. So much of it. So much of it. Yeah. So if you got it, you got it, and you know you got it because I think somebody understands what I'm telling them. But if you haven't played that kind of game a lot, play this because I think you'll become aware of what that can be. So anyway, thanks.